InternMakers. My name is Governess Simpson and I'm a rising senior at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, majoring in industrial and systems engineering with a minor in computer science. I was born in a small suburb of St. Paul, but I've grown up in various regions across the Twin Cities. This summer, I'm interning at Microsoft as a program manager intern on the Windows ecosystem and enablement team. But my journey at Microsoft actually started through their Explore program. On the side, I work as a full-stack developer at Moralizer, which is developing a social media platform for social activism. Today, I'll be going over my journey through engineering, how I interviewed at Microsoft's Explore program, and interviewing as an underclassman in general, as well as addressing imposter syndrome as you first break into the tech industry. Let's get started. Straight up, I didn't think I was going to become an engineer. I was all geared and set to become a vocal performance major. I just didn't envision myself being part of that discipline. I never associated myself as a science kid, so it never even dawned on me. It wasn't until I was in my honors chemistry class that my teacher told me that I had the potential to be an engineer that I ever considered doing it, and I decided to run with it. So before the start of my freshman year of college, I interned at the Science Museum of Minnesota, where I worked on teaching and engaging students in different STEM disciplines, from general engineering to chemistry to biology. During my second semester freshman year, I interned at a health insurance company, triaging tickets and sending them to the appropriate teams. Now, this meant, so say, there was a bug in the system and a consumer found it. They would send that up to me and I'll be like, okay, they found this bug at this point in our system. I had to send it to the right team for them to fix it. So I wasn't quite coding yet, but it exposed me to the engineering teams and the dev division. From there, that summer, I had landed a research experience for undergrads, or an REU, at the University of Minnesota, where I got to research virtual reality and its implications on interior design, infrastructure, and architecture. At this point, I started to find my passion and love for technology. And around this time, I also realized that I was struggling with the CS coursework and rigor. Even though I loved what I did and I loved what I was being taught, I just convinced myself that I wasn't smart enough to really keep up and catch up with these kids. I felt really dissatisfied by the result of how it was doing in the coursework, and I ended up transferring to a different major. I was convinced that software engineering was not for me. It was around this time that I got into the pipeline for Microsoft, which was actually because of LinkedIn. About a year prior, I had created a LinkedIn account, and recently I had updated it to reflect my most relevant work experience. A recruiter reached out to see if I was interested in applying for what they called an Explore program at Microsoft. Now, for those who don't know, the Explore program is designated for first and second year students who are just starting their careers in technology. It is 4 weeks of program management and 8 weeks of software engineering. The goal of this program is to expose you to these two different types of disciplines, and then, if you so choose, return to Microsoft focused on one of those disciplines as a returning intern. Now, this is a great opportunity for underclassmen because most of the time, companies don't hire underclassmen. They focus on juniors and above because they want to convert them to full-time. So getting an internship like this puts you ahead of the curve. Just like Microsoft Explore, there are tons of programs like this, like Google Step, for example, or Facebook University. So even though this internship was made for students like me, I still felt very overwhelmed and a bit underprepared. I hadn't even taken a data structures and algorithms class yet, which is what most technical interviews tend to revolve around. And I had never done a technical interview at all. At the same time, I was already doubting my skills in computer science and becoming a software engineer. I was worried that I wasn't as qualified as the other candidates. That being said, I decided to take a leap of faith and still apply anyway. I mean, what was the harm either way? So the process itself is very, very standard. I filled out an application, I then did a phone interview, and then from there, I went on site for a live final interview at their headquarters in Redmond, Washington. To be honest, I didn't know how to prepare for these technical interviews. I had purchased what people consider to be the holy grail of interview prep, which is cracking the coding interview, which is true, but for me, it was very, very overwhelming. If I were to redo everything again, one thing that I would be sure to do is to focus on some more of the basic topics. This includes big O notation, so learning about space and time complexity, as well as some basic data structures and algorithms, such as strings and arrays, linked lists, and hash maps. One thing to keep in mind that this is for underclassmen. They know you haven't taken an operating systems class or a databases class yet, so I tend to focus more on the basic concepts. This also meant me learning more about the language that I'd be coding in, so learning about object-oriented programming as well as some of the libraries that might be well known. Final thing to note is that practice coding on a whiteboard. For most of the final round in-person interviews, it's going to be a lot different. You're not going to have an IDE where you can code and you can debug and you can run. You have to be writing code live on a whiteboard. And so I found an empty classroom. I just grabbed the marker and I found a question. I just started practicing, writing on the board and speaking as I talked, just so I can get used to that format. And I highly recommend you do so as well. The whole process of preparing for an interview was stressful and nerve-wracking. I have found so much respect for people who had landed internships in those positions because it takes a lot of work. Even with the amount of connections or the referrals that you have to grind and show to interviewers that you are the most suitable candidate for the role, and that takes a lot of time. So flash forward to the day of the interview. I was terrified. Everyone was coming out of their interview saying, oh, that was so easy, and I'm sitting there with my hands in my head saying, oh my God, I think I bombed that. The first question, they asked me about a data structure that I was not confident in at all, but I did my best and I came in with a growth mindset. I asked questions, admitted if I needed help or needed some more direction, and I did the best that I could with the knowledge that I had. I let things be. I sent a thank you note for the interviewers. That's always a good courtesy thing to do, is just to send a thank you email or note to the people who interviewed you and took the time to bring you in. And after a week later, I received my offer letter from Microsoft. That summer, I ended up working in the developer division, which revolves around the developer tools used both internal and external to the organization. I worked on the VisualStudio.net team, where I got to work on the front end of a compiler, and it was a fantastic experience. If you want to work at Microsoft, the first thing I'd recommend is exploring the company and seeing what's available. Microsoft is a huge company, so it's important to know where your interests lie, whether that be in gaming development or building web applications. Next, I recommend reaching out to someone who has previously worked or is currently employed at Microsoft, so you can learn more about what their day-to-day life is like, as well as assess cultural fit. You can do this via LinkedIn, for example. Type in Microsoft on the search bar, find someone who's employed there, reach out, just say, hey, I'd love to learn more about what you do in your job. Can we do a short informal interview? Hopefully they would say yes and reach out and you guys will start that discussion. Finally, I just recommend looking at their website, which is usually a treasure trove of information on their mission and value statements, as well as their general interview tips and tricks. For freshmen or sophomores looking for internships, it's important to demonstrate to companies that you are interested and passionate about technology. For me, this meant getting involved in research my freshman year and getting a paper published, as well as taking on leadership roles at my school's computer science club. This may look different for you. You may, for example, work with your friends to build a mobile application, or you might choose to get involved in hackathons. What's important to note is that for internships geared towards first or second year students, they know that you don't know everything. They're simply trying to assess a baseline understanding of computer science fundamentals, and from there, they're then looking for your grit, your passion, your curiosity, and your drive, which is shown through your involvements both inside and outside the classroom. Also, make sure your LinkedIn is up to date. That is what caught the eye of the recruiter and gave me the position of where I am today. Your profile is your brand and what employers are looking for, so make sure you update each section thoroughly. Finally, I want to leave with some parting words on how I navigated through imposter syndrome throughout my time interviewing. In the entire process, I convinced myself that it was a fluke, that I wasn't good enough, and that I wouldn't follow through. I thought this way because there weren't really a lot of people who looked like me in that field that I could look up to, so it was very difficult to visualize myself in that profession. One thing that helped me tremendously was finding a community of people who supported my endeavors and my goals. And for me, this was the Association for Computing Machinery, or ACM, or ACMW, which is the women's chapter. It was relieving to find a group of women who had experienced the same thing that I have, and it made me feel less alone. One thing that I didn't do that I wish I would have done back then was get a mentor. I have several now, and I am extremely grateful for them. They've worked in the industry, and so for a student like me, they are invaluable. They have given me tips on interviewing, connected me, and expanded my network. It just helped me navigate through my career prospects. It makes me feel less alone as I have one more person in my corner supporting me. Finally, I want the part that imposter syndrome. regardless of who you are, is completely natural in the tech industry. Everyone there is crazy smart and have accomplished so much, it can feel intimidating at times. It's important to know that you and your successes and your accomplishments that you've attained are not flukes and did not come out of luck. Your failures do not define you, and you are capable to win and to thrive. And if no one has paved the way before you, as in my situation, pave your own way. That's all I have for now. I invite you all to connect with me on LinkedIn, as that is my main social media platform of choice. I hope these tips were helpful for you, and I wish you well on the rest of your journey in technology.